Hey everybody, welcome back as we continue day 2 of Techstars Startup Week Dayton 2020. So our 10 a.m. panel is the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad advice. So your crazy neighbor, Uncle Ed, your butcher, they all offer you advice when you tell them you're starting a business. What advice do you trust? Who can you trust? Who is trying to scam you? Our panel of seasoned entrepreneurs have seen and heard it all. They will share their stories of the worst advice they've ever gotten and guidelines for making sure that you think a little harder before trusting Uncle Ed. Our moderator for this session is Andy Cothrell, Vice President of the Venture Portfolio at Cornerstone Research Group. The entrepreneurs sharing their wisdom this morning are Sherry Scott, Founder and Principal Architect at Springhouse Architects, Chris Dimmick, Managing Partner at the Idea Collective, global hospitality development and design firm that most recently launched Tender Mercy, downtown Dayton's newest avant-garde bar, and Juanita Darden, founder of Third Perk Coffee House and Wine Bar. Just a reminder, we've got our session Q&A live, so if you're in the app, go to the session Q&A feature, submit your questions that way, and we'll feed those to the speakers as we go. So Andy, off to you.
Thank you, Audrey, and good morning, Dayton Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. Before we dive into everything, this is my one chance to give reliably good advice. Go to Juanita's place and go to Chris's place. Get different things to drink at the different places, but you will not be disappointed. All right, and they didn't pay me to say that. So really excited for the session and to dive in. I'm going to ask the panel to each give just a little bit of background on their entrepreneurial journey. In brief, I've been a startup guy mostly in the med tech space, although now with Cornerstone, I'm getting into a lot of different areas as well. As a result, I've gotten plenty of bad advice, and in my role as an advisor, I've probably given some bad advice as well. So I've been on both sides of that fence. But panel, if you would just to kind of put your comments in context for the folks in terms of what you've done, so they know kind of what experiences you're drawing on when you talk about the advice you've gotten. So Juanita, why don't we start with you? A little background on how you got to where you are today on your entrepreneurial journey.
Good morning. Thank you. So guys, I am Juanita Michelle. I am the owner of Third Perk Coffee House and Wine Bar. We've been in operation since 2015, starting at 46 West 5th Street in beautiful downtown Dayton. We are now at the Dayton Mall, and we are so excited that we will be relaunching our coffee house back at 146 East 3rd, Third Perk on 3rd Street. So we'll be back downtown in only a few weeks. So my entrepreneurship goes way back. I've been developing businesses probably since I was 9 years old, creating a fruit stand in front of my parents' home when I was a really young girl. So I've always had that burning in my belly. I'm excited that Third Perk will not only relaunch downtown, but we will open in the Gym City Market in 2021 upon the completion of the market on Salem. And we're also expanding our wings, going into a full service soul food carry out kitchen also in 2021. So we got a lot of exciting things that's coming forth. We're excited that we're spreading our wings into West Dayton. I am a West Dayton girl, so I'm happy to share my business with that part of the city. And I am always interested in helping young entrepreneurs pursue their dreams and their passions. And I've had a wealth of bad advice, which I'll share with you later. And I've had some people who gave me some great wisdom and some pearls that I wear proudly. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm always here to help.
Super. Thanks, Juanita. Sherry, how about you? We're not getting any sound, Sherry. I think you might be muted.
I was. Better?
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Sherry Scott. I am the founder of Springhouse Architects. We are down here in Springboro, a little ways away from you guys, but I consider our hometown to be Dayton. We work in all of the surrounding Dayton areas and are expanding to Cincinnati and Columbus in our architecture capacity. I started the firm 12 years ago. And it was just me. I just started with one builder that wanted to use my services, and I've grown it since to a full-time job. And we have 7 people currently, which in the architecture world is a mid-size firm. Architecture is a little bit different. A lot of people are solopreneurs. Mid-size, which is up to 10, and then large, which is 10 to like 200. So it's surprisingly good right now with COVID. People are turning to their homes and trying to find solace and comfort in their homes a little bit. So that's been good for us to help people through figuring out how to best do that with their existing homes or new homes. I have recently, I'm very excited to say, during COVID, I got scared of what was going to happen with our business, and I decided to start a construction company. So now we are building our own projects, which is very exciting, and I've gotten lots of bad advice on whether to start or not start, what price point to be at. You know, everyone has lots of opinions. So I'm currently sorting through a lot of bad and good advice, both.
Excellent. Chris, I was at Tender Mercy, I think just last weekend or 2 weekends before that. Place is looking great, but what a trip to get there. And I know you've done a lot of interesting things before Tender Mercy as well. So give us a little bit on that.
Yeah. Originally from Southern California. I've been in Dayton for about 5 years now. I've been in the hospitality operations space in restaurants, bars, and hotels. My entire career. I was actually born into the industry. My family's in the business. Started a operational consulting business about 12 years ago in LA, and then merged that firm with my current partners at the Idea Collective when we relocated to Dayton. So we do hospitality development and design for a fee as consultants globally, and then we started our own hospitality group here in Dayton with a number of flagship properties that are in development now. So always been an entrepreneur very early on.
Terrific.
Before that was a word well used.
For me, the challenge for this panel is because everybody's gotten bad advice. Sometimes you don't know it's bad advice for quite some time. Sometimes it's really obvious that it's bad advice right up front. And do we start with a bang? What's the worst advice you've ever gotten? So I think we'll build to that. What I want to start with, though, because everyone knows bad advice is out there, right, is what are some things you've done kind of proactively to try to filter bad advice? Do you count to 1,000 after getting advice? Do you use an advisory board? What are some things you do to try to mitigate or to detect and defer bad advice? And anybody want to take that one first?
I can jump in.
Sure.
So one thing that I try to use as a gauge is to look at people who I would consider as a mentor and take their advice as sage advice. It's a little more difficult to take advice from someone who, number one, maybe has never been in business. Number two, has no experience in the industry that you're working in. Or number three, just someone who just has an opinion about everything. So I've tried to make that my guidepost. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to meet someone like Chris Dimick, who has a wealth of hospitality experience. who was able to share and work as a mentor. So you have those who come into your life who have a broad, a very diverse wealth of information to share, and then others who really just kind of sit on the sideline and they're sideline coaches, and they have a lot of things to share, but not always the best things for you and your business.
Okay. Terrific. Chris, Sherry, either you take specific measures to try to limit that advice infiltration?
Yeah, I feel like I also have a mentor, who is not in my business, but she just is a great person and I fully respect her opinion. That's one way. Really, for me though, it takes me a couple of days to do a gut check to say, are they telling me this because it's just the way it's always done? That's kind of the way I've built my business, because I don't want to do it the way it's always been done. I know many architects that are miserable in their jobs, and that's not the business I want to work in. That's not where I want to work, and that's not where I want to put my passion. So that's kind of a litmus test for me. Like, is this the way it's always been done, and is that what I want?
So Sherry, I want to build on that, and then Chris will jump to you, but I want to pull that thread a little bit, because one of the things I think entrepreneurs struggle with is some things have always been done that way for a reason, right? There's perfectly good, legitimate reasons why things are done that way, and if you don't do them that way, ouch. And there's other times where people just do things that way because that's how they saw it get done once, or that's how they read that it should get done. How do you as an entrepreneur develop a sense for which one it is?
Yeah, good question. I'll give you a real example for like right at this minute in my life. Deciding to become a design build firm instead of just architecture. Architects would tell me, if you're an architect, you do architecture and you help people through the whole process, and that's what you do. Like, this is sacred ground, and architects don't become builders. But then I look out in the world, and especially in Dayton, Ohio, there are so many design build firms. And so that's why I was weighing, like, okay, one group is telling me this is the way it's always done for architects, but the real world is telling me, there's something to this design build thing, and there's some synergy, and there's some savings, and there's some excitement there. So that's I think you have to kind of compare a couple of different scenarios to see which one is going to work for you.
Okay. Chris, how about you? Ways you're an advice giver as well as an advice taker, so you probably see both sides. But what do you do to try to mitigate the impact of bad advice?
It actually does. It goes both ways here. I think one of the things I'm wary of when I'm talking to a mentor or someone who's curious about what we're doing and wants to help is how much do they listen to understand the position that I'm actually in, or we're actually in that moment. I feel like when there's so much advice out there, when you get those really quick boilerplate kind of packaged, bottled up answers, to me, that's a red flag. I think there are a lot of people that want to help, but at the same time, there are a lot of people maybe older in their career, a little further down the road, that are looking to give back, but maybe not really to help you, maybe to stroke their own ego and stay busy and contribute. And so I like to take it slow. And I'm looking for advice from people who are going to take the time to actually understand what it is that we're going through and what the actual needs are. And as an advice giver, it's the same thing. I try to, ask those probing questions and really figure out, what are the specifics of the situation, and, how might we look at it? I think a lot of times you get, this is what I've done, or this is what I would do. And 99% of the time, we're in different situations and have different realities and challenges. So patience, I think, with mentors in general and seeking out folks who are looking to help for the right reason, and can have kind of proven themselves to be on the right side of the idea of mentorship.
Yeah, that's it's interesting, the listening piece, because a lot of bad advice is well intentioned, right? People don't intend to sabotage your business with their lousy advice, but they do anyway. And so, as I think about different types of bad advice givers, I think about what I call the solo success, right? They've been successful at one thing, and if your business is like that one thing, then their advice is great. But if your business isn't like that one thing, it's not so good. Or what I call the nearby guy, who was in a situation that was successful, and therefore they honestly think, I understand what creates success. Well, but all they did was show up, right? It's Peter Sellers being there, right? They were there when success happened. That doesn't mean they understand cause and effect in terms of how that success was created. Have you guys found any sort of trends in your bad advice receipt in terms of where bad advice tends to come from more often than not? Juanita, has that been the case for you at all?
I can't really say that I've had any trends in my bad advice. It's been varied throughout the years. I've had people come into the coffee house and they notice our specialty drinks, and I think you should have a John Wayne drink. I'm like, John Wayne's not from Dayton. But, I mean, with a chuckle. But it's everything from menu suggestions to people who are going to suggest how you should gain capital for your business. I've had people say, you should just go get a business grant. And before COVID, they just really weren't that prominent. When you're in we're in a capitalistic society. We are for-profit businesses. So they're not just laying around, like you're walking through the garden and there's grants for you to pick up. I've had people who suggested that I add a stock man at the corner of 5th Street and Main Street to draw attention. One of those things that kind of blow up and come back down. And everything from, those simple items to things on how I should operate the business. And like I said, it doesn't come from any one place. It's just, it seems pretty random. And it could be from people who I've known, and then it could be from complete strangers. It's just varied. But it's not been anything that I can really say there's a trend, or I've seen people make suggestions on the same thing all the time. I do believe that if I were to hear the exact same thing from multiple sources, that's probably something that I need to pay attention to, because there's probably some type of gap in what we're doing. But a lot of times it's varied.
Okay. Chris, is that your experience as well? Or have you seen certain sources of bad advice repeat?
I think as an entrepreneur seeking advice, over time, you start to kind of hone in on your tribe. Maybe you do have an advisory board, or you have a few key people that you can go back to. I think it's trial and error. I think we do definitely need to cast a wide net, especially early on in our careers or in our ventures. You're going to catch a lot of bad, but if you can identify the good and keep going back to that well, I think that's kind of how I've operated, at least. And then you've got, in today's society, the two-way review system of things like Yelp and, Angie's List, maybe in the construction and architecture world. And I think a lot of people, you hear, folks are only going to give you this feedback or this advice after a negative experience. And so a lot of folks tend to take those things personally and maybe dismiss them, especially coming from the general public. I actually think there's gold in those reviews. And I think a lot of folks tend to write those things off too quickly. We really like to dive into those because there's a nugget in there somewhere. And so we pay close attention to the stuff that we get back from the general public, and most of it is kind of BS, or there's a reason that's not understood, kind of something contextual behind the way things are done, the way they're done. But we certainly do pay attention to those things. I think that there's value in the review sites and the review platforms as well.
Great. Sherry, how about you in your business?
Yeah, it just dawned on me. It's so different, our businesses, because you guys work with kind of quick interactions, right? And the feedback you get can be almost instantaneous. Where we work with people for 2 years sometimes to come to a finished product, but what I was thinking also is the worst advice, the common thread is typically from people that have never run a business, right? Mm-hmm. People that have never run a business, they've been an employee, they've been a government worker, whatever, and that's the majority of the world, right? But when they give me advice, I almost immediately shut down. I'm like, I can't even explain to you how many things go into this one decision that you're telling me, well, you should, if they ever say you should just do whatever, I'm just like, I just can't even listen, because I'm like, there's no just about the decision that I make.
Just go raise a couple $1 million.
Yeah, just a grant, right? Just open another restaurant. Just start building. There are some good things there, but my goodness, when it starts with that, I'm like, no, I'll think of it on my own. Thank you very much.
That's a great kind of tell. I'm going to look for that as a flag now. When people start with have the word "just" in their advice, that might be a good yellow flag there. So let's get into the fun story part, because I'm sure there's probably some bad advice we've all been given, and there may be some bad advice that's unique to each one of us or to our businesses. And we don't have to make it the ultimate, absolute worst advice you've ever gotten, because I don't know if you can even pick that. But let's go with top 10 at least. Top 10 bad advice that you've gotten along the way. Sherry, what would you say is one of your top 10 bad pieces of advice you've gotten?
I would say one of the worst pieces of advice that I actually took and ran with was sharing, like being an open organization with my employees. And it sounds like great advice on the surface, because the idea is then everyone buys in, everyone works toward the same goal. And I believe in all of that, but I took their advice way too literally, and really shared everything, shared projects we were going after, projects that that we made a good profit on, and projects that we didn't, that we lost money on. And it just is shocking to me how people cherry pick that information. And it kind of goes back to not listening to advice of people that haven't run a business, because it's such, all of that information feeds into all of your decisions, right? And unless I'm going to teach each one of those people all of the things that one decision affects, then you're just feeding them information and they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, the context, right? There's a lot of context.
In context, exactly. That's the right word. So what happened was I started sharing like projects we won, projects we lost, how we made money, how we didn't. And then all of a sudden everybody wanted a raise. And I'm not against giving raises. Like, I'm a very generous person, but I'm like, did you not hear the 3 projects that we failed at and why we failed? Of course, they did not hear that. They just heard that this project was great and we made a profit on it. And so they're like, oh, well, if I'm making you money, maybe I could get a raise. Like, so yeah, that was, so now I don't share everything. I share most, good and bad news, but I've learned, I needed to temper myself a little bit what I shared.
That's a great example. Either Chris or Juanita, have either of you had the over transparency issue come up in your businesses?
Not for us. We run pretty lean, and we especially in hospitality, you're building teams. You want in order to scale, you need to have almost an open book leadership or management style, because you're developing operators within each venue that you can then kind of manage those teams. So we do lead into a pretty deep level of transparency and openness within our organizations, but I do think it's a fine line. You definitely want to protect some of the secret sauce stuff. You want to protect some of the scary stuff, so as not to impact the culture in a negative way. But yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong way about it. But
well, Anita, how about in your business?
I agree with Sherry and Chris. I feel like my team got a little stronger when I was communicating better with my team. I was giving them, for me, I gave them more information on like how many transactions were necessary for operation on a daily basis for us to break even, and what our goal number of transactions were on a daily basis. I did give my employees information on just gave them like, this is our goal for the day as far as the sales number, and made them understand, this helps us stay on not so much where we're profitable, but just so that we are staying operable. So just giving them that much information was a big help, because they understood what was necessary for us to survive. So that communication for me, they took a little ownership in understanding that we needed to do more, and we needed to figure out how to pull more people into the business so we could make those goals.
That's a really interesting point, and I think it really gets to the crux of how much to share. Is information creates a feeling of ownership, and sometimes information freaks people out. And sometimes you don't find that out until you share, right? So, a lot of I run a lot of pre-revenue startups in medical device, which usually takes years and millions of dollars, right, to get a product to market. And, some teams you can say, hey, we're going to go and we need to raise $1 million by November 1st, or it's over. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And other teams, you say that and they're like, the sky is falling, I'm out of here, right? And understanding what you've got to work with there, right, as an entrepreneur is really critical, I think, to how much information to share. And share your point, a lot of advice givers have no appreciation for that, right? It's whatever culture they came from, then you should be transparent, or they read a book, the latest management book that said you should be transparent. And like you, I believe in let's be as transparent as we can be. Right? It was one of Jack Welch's 6 rules, way back in the 80s, right? Yeah. It was to share things with everybody, be transparent with everybody. But there are certainly situations where that works to the detriment of the business. So that was a good top 10er. Juanita, what comes to mind for you for a sort of a top 10 bad advice?
I got. Let me pull something out of the bag. It's a full bag. I remember when we were on a journey to find a location before we found our space at 46 West 5th Street in downtown. I had a lot of interesting suggestions on where I would plant what would become the People's Coffee House. It would be gas stations, and I don't know if putting a food establishment into a formal gas station is okay as far as the health department is concerned. had locations that did not check any of the boxes that I had listed in my business plan. Wrong side of the street, not a high visible area. You know, people just were like, you should put it here. And, you know, not really thinking that when I was making a plan for the business, some of the things that were important to me is I'm a coffee house. So people are usually on their way in town or they're on their way to an interstate. So you want to be on the right side of the street so it's easy to turn in and easy for them to turn out. And, you know, for some people, they don't get that, that is a good check when you're choosing a location for quick cuisine in the morning where your time is important. One of the things that I had hoped for in our first location is to have a space that would have allowed us to have a drive-through. That wasn't the case for our downtown location, but one of the things we could offer is for people to pull up and we would take their coffee out to their car. So no, we didn't have the drive-up service, but we could have that quick curbside service. So that was one of the big things for me, just in the 18 months that it took for us to actually find a suitable space. The comments and suggestions that we had, I spent a lot of time looking at places that just didn't fit our model. I had a realtor, after her and I had a conversation on what I was looking for. She took me to a beauty salon and she said, well, I want you just to be open-minded. You know, this could be your coffee house. And I'm like, I walked in, I'm like, this cannot be my coffee house. This is a real beauty salon. This is not going to work for the vision that we have in mind. So I wasn't sure if she and I were communicating well because there was nothing that I had communicated to her that would have made that a good fit. So, you know, my location was one of the things that really kind of ring in my mind as far as some of the advice I received before we even started the coffee house.
That's a good one, and for sharing, Chris, I want to generalize it a little bit, which is the advice you get when sometimes somebody's in the mix and what they really want to do is close a transaction, right? It could be financing advice where somebody's going to get a commission or a spiff. It could be real estate. It could, you know, where yes, they're an expert in their field, but their primary motivation is to close a transaction, right? And I'm not dinging on realtors, right? But that is their primary motivation, is to close a transaction. And it could be a decade or more before you think you need a realtor again. And so, you know, that the market forces create certain behavior sets. And Sherry, Chris, have you guys gotten bad advice in those contexts where there's really someone's kind of motivated to get to an outcome that maybe isn't necessarily going to put your interests first?
All the time, every day.
And how do you, is that something you've gotten good at sensing and sussing out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess that's more typically part of a negotiation is what we're talking about. But yeah, you know, you get a lot of thirsty people out there that have to put food on the table. And, you know, with enough experience, you start to pick up on that stuff pretty quick. But yeah, if it doesn't serve your bottom line, you know, it's probably some pretty bad advice.
What about you, Sherry? Have you had those situations? I would think as you move from architecture into construction, you'll probably feel that more and more.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't had a lot of experience with that yet, but I think you're right. I really think it's coming. So this is like, I need to jot all of this down for myself. I'm an advice getter right now, not a giver.
Excellent. So Chris, how about you? A top 10 bad advice?
Top 10. I got so much. I think one of the ones that I think a lot of us hear early on, even going back to, you know, our educational days in school, thinking about what you're going to do with your life, this whole idea of follow your passion. I get that. I think it's super important to pursue things that you're interested in. My personal story, I was passionate about sports, and I knew I couldn't be an athlete. So all the way through college, I was going to be a sports agent. I was passionate about business, and I was good at relationships. And, by the time I got into college, I did some interning, and I realized it wasn't for me. And so at a pretty critical age, I got the advice to just do what you're good at. Start with what you're good at. And I think it's been an interesting process, because I think as you commit to the things where you're strong, for me, it was interpersonal relationships and communication skills and leadership and problem solving, and that all fit into something I was already good at, which was operating restaurants and being in that space and providing great hospitality. And I think over time, especially as a young person, go do what you're good at, go work for someone, go get some real world experience, and see how becoming an expert then creates and enforces a passion. I think that's one of the big ones that a lot of young people get held up on is, I'm really passionate about makeup. I'm going to open a salon. And it's like, maybe not. What are you good at? Go get some real world experience and go find out what you're good at if you don't know. But I think, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours and becoming an expert, I think passion comes along with that. And so that's one of the things that I always got hung up on. Can be a little misleading, follow your passion.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, right? Because you think it do what you love seems safe, right? That seems like safe advice, unless you suck at it, right? That's probably not such good advice, right? It's things, to me, it's hard for something to feel fun if I'm no good at it, right? It's hard to love something I'm no good at, but I know some people find themselves in that situation. So that makes me think of, Chris, advice like that is sort of a truism, right? So there's all these truisms out there. One I heard that is just sticks in my mind as top 10 bad advice, right, is I was in a situation where I was advising multiple startups, and somebody who also was in a position where they should have been advising multiple startups said, what startups need are 80-90% the same, right? There's 10 or 20% that's specific to a startup, and 80 or 90% of it is the same. No, it isn't. Here's just a sampling of 3 entrepreneurs, and we've already pointed out some really big differences between your businesses and business models, right? So no, it isn't. But it's something you hear over and over again, right? And so do what you love. Are there other sort of those truisms that people just sort of flippantly, they hear it over and over, and so they feel empowered to just repeat it to you? Have you gotten some of those that have proved to be bad advice? Juanita, have you gotten any of that?
Excuse me, I had to unmute myself. I have a funny story about just about coffee in general. I've had we sell specialty coffee. It's gourmet coffee. It is roasted locally. We have probably one of the best roasters in the region who supplies us coffee. And I had a customer come in, and they asked me if I ever use Folgers, Folgers coffee, and they were so serious, and they're like, do you think about ever using Folgers? And I mean, everybody kind of stopped, and they kind of looked like, Folgers coffee? Like, I don't even think Folgers has an espresso bean or a whole bean. I mean, Folgers coffee.
But their empty containers are really useful, so.
They're good for saving pennies and quarters and nickels and dimes. But people just giving great suggestions on where you should get your supply. And I was thinking to myself, I have a lot of coffee connoisseurs who come here they're going to be very upset if I'm making their cold brew out of Folgers coffee. They're not gonna. They may not think it's good to the last drop. So it's just one of those things that you have to be careful about, because we're offering a premium product, so we have to be very careful in making sure that we're using premium materials to supply that premium product to our customers.
Yeah. What about you, Sherry? Any truisms that come your way that have proven to be not so good advice?
Yeah, a lot of them actually. I am. When Chris was talking about the passion piece, you see the quote all the time on Instagram: "Do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life." Right? Like, there's no way that's true. Like, I love what I do. I'm doing what I should be doing, and I work very, very hard. It's a lot of work. I always go back to the first time this kind of dawned on me that truisms, you got to figure it out for yourself. I raised 3 boys. They're all, like, my last one is leaving in 2 weeks. And the whole boys will be boys, right? Like, that is not true. Boys do have things about them that are different than girls, and they're hard to raise, but, you know, boys will be boys as an excuse doesn't fly. And very recently, me deciding to go into construction, people say, you know, stick with what you know. If you just stick with what you know, you'll be fine. Well, there are times to try new things, and there are times to get outside of your own box. And the other one that's hitting me right now is don't bite the hand that feeds you. Because really, I'm going into competition now with some of the contractors that have traditionally brought me clients. And you know, I just had to, and that is a truism. Like, it is true, don't bite the hand that feeds you, but sometimes you have to decide for yourself when you're going to go against those things. And I think that's how you sometimes make progress. Progress is not always safe.
That's true for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chris, how about you? I know you had shared some thoughts on it pre-paneling, so you probably couldn't even get through all yours. But in terms of truisms that aren't necessarily true in terms of advice quality, what sticks out in your mind? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Failure is not an option, I think, is one that a lot of young people get hung up on as well. You know, we really embrace the F word. I think you need to be able to take chances. You need to fail fast. I think failing fast and breaking things in the technology space, that's overdone as well. You can't just keep throwing millions of dollars at really bad ideas. It's a fine line, but, you know, we really embrace the idea of taking chances, of trying to do things that we're not comfortable doing necessarily, and just learning from them. I think the actual failure is in how you choose to receive that negative experience. If you learn from it, if you apply it, if you make sure you don't make that mistake again, that's a massive success and a catalyst for growth. When you do have failures and mistakes and challenging and adversarial times, if you let that beat you up, if you let that bring you down, that is the failure. And so I think it's all in the perspective and finding those silver linings in those experiences and moving forward. But yeah, failure is not an option. It's like, yeah, of course it is. And it's going to happen, and it's inevitable.
It's not going to feel good, but try to get what you can out of it, right? I mean, that's, yeah. So the questions are starting to come in. So probably a good time for the panel to move to some questions. So here's one. Have any of you worked with business consultants / coach / mentor to get advice about blind spots you may have?
Absolutely. Yeah, I in the last few years actually just kind of felt the need to surround myself with some fresh perspectives, especially since moving to Dayton and relocating from kind of the network that I had built in Los Angeles to the network that I'll continue to build hopefully for the rest of my life here in Dayton. So I put together an advisory board of really just friends. It was less to do about business, and it was more to do about identifying those specific things. What am I not aware of? What am I taking for granted? What do I not understand about this market or this place or this community? So on and so forth. So yeah, I think that's a phenomenal question, and I think being that self-reflective is going to serve you very well moving forward.
Sherry, Juanita, either of you try to seek out consultant, coach, or mentor to get blind spot advice?
I am always seeking advice. I am sometimes I feel like I'm a one-man band, especially on the administrative side, because I do a lot of things on my own. So I do like to seek out the help of others, so that I am made aware of some things that I may be falling short on, or some things that I may be overlooking. Because when you're doing so many things on your own, sometimes it's hard to recognize what you're missing. So yes, I seek help.
Yeah, and I do as well. I have a personal mentor that was a family friend, and really I call on her when I have big decisions to make, and she's really good at pulling questions out of me. And additionally, on the business side, I have had, for the past 5 years, I've had a business coach that we meet every other week, and we go through hard numbers and how I'm feeling about things, how employee relationships are going, and really kind of brings me back into the business side when I get a little bit lost in the architecture side.
Interesting. For me, one of the things I find helpful is to try to think of advice as ideas and not advice. It depersonalizes it a little bit, because sometimes people I don't particularly like have really good ideas, right? But I might not want to take their advice, but I might consider their idea, right? or vice versa. Somebody I really like and trust, they give advice, and you feel like almost like a sense of loyalty. Oh, maybe I should follow their advice. Whereas if I think about it, oh, it's an idea, I'll analyze it as an idea and see whether it fits my situation versus advice. Okay, so this is admittedly an off-topic question for Chris. Any updates about Sueño? So excited for it to debut. Oh, you're muted again.
We
Chris.
are about it debuting.
I'm bad at this mute thing. Sueño is in process. It's an interesting time to be opening a full seat, 140 seat full service elevated restaurant. But yeah, things are moving, and we're just trying to gather as much information as we can day over day, week over week. We've got plans B, C, D, E, and F as far as how we take it to market initially, if COVID is still a challenge. That's going to force us to reevaluate the business model and the service model and all that fun stuff. So I would love to say that we've got a finite plan and a hard date and start sending out VIP invites, but that is not realistic in today's climate.
Yeah. So here's some advice. It's probably good advice, Chris. Be careful. So thank you very much, Pam. I think we're out of time and need to wrap it up, but really appreciate you sharing your insights and some examples of some different forms of bad advice, because so often you don't know whether advice is good or bad until it's a done deal. And so the more we can help anybody who's watching our session today head off some bad advice.
Frozen.
No, well, at least we were able to keep Andy with us right until the very end of our session today. Echoing those sentiments, thank you, Andy, for being our moderator today. Thank you, panelists, for all jumping on, sharing your stories and sharing your advice. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. We're rooting for all of you, and I heard some exciting news today, I think, about all of your businesses. So thanks for sharing that with the Startup Week community. Next up, take a break, get some water, answer some emails, and then join us at 11 for a fireside chat with Robin Gentry McGee, who is the founder of Functional Formularies. So she's going to be talking to us a little bit about her journey from culinary chef to MedTech founder. Again, thanks. This week is made possible from our title sponsors, Fifth Third Bank, Wright State Applied Research Corporation, and the Entrepreneur Center. So thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you in 10 minutes or so.